In a small, quiet town, a simple act of kindness from a little girl sets off a chain of events that no one could have expected. What happens next changes the lives of a struggling single father, his disabled son, and the town forever. Mark wiped the sweat from his brow and glanced at the clock, realizing he was running late. His hand shook slightly as he balanced a brown paper bag filled with sandwiches, fruit, and a thermos of juice. It wasn't much, but it was all he could give Alex, his 10-year-old son who had been born with cerebral palsy. Life had been a delicate balance of work, therapy sessions, and sleepless nights, but Mark carried it all with a quiet determination. Today, like every day, he whispered to himself that he had to get Alex to school on time, to make sure he felt included, to make him feel normal in a world that often didn't understand him. Alex's small hand clutched his father's as they walked down the narrow hallway of their apartment building, his bright eyes scanning everything with curiosity and wonder. "Dad," he said softly, "will anyone sit with me today?" Mark smiled faintly, the ache in his chest sharp but familiar. "I don't know, buddy, but remember, even if no one does, you have me." Lunch hour came swiftly, and Alex wheeled himself into the cafeteria, his backpack clanging softly against the metal of his chair. He lowered himself carefully onto the bench, his movements deliberate and precise. Mark had taught him to be independent, but every action reminded him how much care Alex still needed. Around them, the room buzzed with chatter, laughter, and the occasional shout. Kids in groups exchanged jokes, traded snacks, and laughed at things Mark couldn't hear, couldn't understand. Alex's fingers fiddled with the edge of his sandwich, and he looked down at it with a small frown. It wasn't just hunger, it was the weight of being different, of being left out. Mark lingered at the doorway, watching silently, his heart tightening with every passing second. From across the cafeteria, a small voice broke through the noise. Emma, a bright-eyed girl with a crooked ponytail and an unwavering smile, noticed Alex sitting alone. She tugged at her friend's sleeve, but shook her head when he hesitated. With careful steps, she approached Alex, her tray clutched tightly in her hands. "Hi," she said, voice soft but full of warmth. Alex looked up, startled by the attention, unsure if he should respond. Her presence was a shock, a sudden beam of light cutting through the shadows he was used to. She placed half of her sandwich on his tray without asking, a simple gesture loaded with courage and kindness. "I thought you might like some company," she said, sitting down beside him. Mark's eyes widened as he watched from a distance. His chest felt tight with a mix of relief and disbelief. He had been conditioned to expect judgment, pity, or avoidance from the world. Yet here was a little girl offering friendship without hesitation or expectation. Alex hesitated for a moment, glancing up at his father, who gave a subtle nod, urging him to accept the kindness. Slowly, Alex reached out and took the sandwich, a tiny smile breaking across his face. "Thanks," he whispered, the words almost swallowed by the cafeteria's noise. Emma smiled back, her own dimples brightening as she responded, "You're welcome." "I like sharing." The moment felt suspended in time. For once, Mark allowed himself to breathe, to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone could see Alex for who he truly was, not for what he couldn't do. Around them, Life continued as usual, yet a ripple of warmth radiated from their small corner. Mark felt a quiet pride, mingled with the ever-present fear that the world would intrude and break this fragile bubble. "You've got a friend now," he whispered to Alex as he approached, crouching to meet his son's eyes. Alex nodded, his smile growing, and for the first time in a long while, the tension in his body eased just a little. But kindness rarely goes unnoticed, especially in a town where curiosity and caution intermingle. From the far end of the cafeteria, a figure leaned against the doorway, his presence commanding and intimidating. Jack, the town's notorious biker, had a reputation that preceded him: rough edges, unpredictable moods, and a past that people whispered about but few truly understood. His leather jacket creaked as he shifted his weight, eyes narrowing on the scene before him. He didn't speak, didn't move closer, yet his gaze was heavy, probing, as if he were trying to decipher the meaning behind a child's simple act of sharing. Mark noticed immediately tension coiling in his stomach. He didn't know Jack, didn't trust him, and yet he couldn't tear his eyes away. Emma continued to chatter with Alex, telling him about her day, the book she loved, and a joke about her dog that made Alex laugh so hard his wheelchair shook. Mark's chest swelled, listening to the sound of pure joy that he hadn't heard in weeks. He glanced back at Jack, whose expression remained unreadable. There was no immediate threat, no obvious kindness either, just a presence, heavy and silent, that made Mark's heart pound. For a brief moment, he worried that the magic of the moment would shatter under the weight of the biker's stare, that Alex would retreat inward, losing the courage Emma had sparked. Emma, oblivious to the tension, nudged Alex gently. "You have mustard on your chin," she said, giggling. Alex reached up, blushing slightly, and wiped it away, his eyes meeting hers with gratitude. "Thanks," he whispered again, more confidently this time. Mark felt a lump form in his throat. There was something transformative happening right here, in the middle of an ordinary school cafeteria. Simple human connection, he realized, could shift hearts and create moments of hope, even when the world seemed cruel and indifferent. Jack shifted slightly, taking a step forward, and for the first time, Mark saw a flicker of curiosity in his eyes, maybe even recognition. It was hard to read, hard to predict what this man wanted or why he lingered. But one thing was clear: he was paying attention. The encounter was no longer just about Emma's kindness or Alex's gratitude. It had become something larger, a silent test of courage, trust, and the unpredictable ways humans can touch each other's lives. As the bell rang and children began to leave the cafeteria, Emma stood and waved at Alex. "See you tomorrow," she said, her voice cheerful. Alex waved back, the smile on his face lingering long after she disappeared around the corner. Mark approached, kneeling beside his son. "You made a friend today," he said softly. Alex nodded, still glowing from the interaction. Mark knew it was more than a friend. It was a spark of something powerful, something that could heal, transform, and challenge even the most hardened hearts. And in the doorway, Jack lingered, watching them leave, his face unreadable, but something deep inside him stirring. Something that would soon connect him to this small family in ways none of them could yet imagine. The next morning, Mark felt a strange mix of relief and unease as he watched Alex prepare for school. The memory of Emma's kindness lingered, warming his heart, but the shadow of the biker at the cafeteria door refused to leave his mind. Jack had remained distant, silent, yet his presence had carried a weight that Mark could neither ignore nor understand. Alex noticed his father's tension and reached out, brushing a hand against his sleeve. "Dad, are you okay?" he asked softly. Mark forced a smile, bending down to meet his son's gaze. "I'm fine, buddy. Just thinking," he replied, knowing the truth was more complicated. He had always been cautious, protective, wary of strangers, especially those who seemed larger than life and carried danger in their silence. Jack's eyes haunted him, and he wondered what kind of man would linger over a simple act of friendship in a school cafeteria. At school, Emma arrived with her usual energy, bright and unstoppable. She waved to Alex, who grinned back, his confidence growing with each interaction. For a brief moment, Mark allowed himself to relax, watching Alex laugh and share a joke with her. But then, as if drawn by some invisible thread, Jack appeared again near the edge of the playground, leaning against a fence, his leather jacket gleaming under the sun. Children avoided his gaze, sensing the tension he carried. But Emma approached him without fear, her curiosity and innocence a stark contrast to his rough exterior. Jack's eyes softened slightly, though he remained still, quiet, and watchful. Mark felt a mix of dread and intrigue. There was something in Jack's presence, something unspoken, that hinted at a story beneath the tough exterior. Jack's interest in the father and son grew over the next few days. He began to appear in small, unexpected ways, near the corner store, at the park, even by the school entrance, always observing, but never intruding. Mark noticed the pattern, anxiety tightening his chest each time. Who was this man? What did he want? And why did his gaze feel so unsettling yet strangely protective? Mark couldn't decide if Jack was a threat or a silent guardian. Alex, oblivious to the tension, continued to light up under Emma's attention. Her laughter, her small gestures of inclusion, slowly melted the layers of isolation he had built around himself. The boy began sharing stories, speaking freely of his dreams and little victories, each word a revelation for Mark, who had spent so long interpreting silence as limitation. Emma, with her unyielding kindness, became a bridge in ways Mark hadn't anticipated. She asked Alex about his favorite books, his hobbies, and even suggested they start a small art project together. Each afternoon, Alex grew more confident, his shyness dissolving under the warmth of her attention. Mark watched quietly, grateful, but aware of the shadow that lingered nearby. Jack's gaze followed every interaction, unreadable but present, like a storm waiting to break. One afternoon, he finally spoke, his voice low and measured, carrying authority without aggression. "She's brave," he said, his eyes fixed on Emma. "Not many kids would do that." Mark stiffened, unsure if the comment was praise, warning, or something else entirely. Jack's presence carried layers, pieces of a life shaped by hardship, hints of a man who understood pain in ways others couldn't. Curiosity began to replace Mark's unease. He noticed small details, the way Jack's eyes softened when Alex laughed, how he lingered just long enough to offer help when needed, though never drawing attention to himself. Mark couldn't deny a certain respect forming alongside his fear. Perhaps Jack wasn't simply a threat. Perhaps he was someone who had lived through struggle and recognized it in Alex and him. The town whispered about Jack's past, about mistakes and violent encounters that had left scars, both physical and emotional. Mark tried to reconcile the reputation with the subtle acts of care he now observed, each interaction leaving him both confused and intrigued. Meanwhile, Emma remained fearless. She offered Alex encouragement, held his hand while crossing the street, and laughed at his jokes, never seeming to notice or care about Jack's looming presence. "You're funny," she said one day, as Alex told a story about a mischievous squirrel. "I like how you see the world." Alex's face lit up, and for the first time, Mark felt a shift, a tiny but significant step toward hope. Jack watched from the distance, silent but attentive, as though he were cataloging each moment, waiting for the right time to step closer. Mark's protective instincts clashed with a strange feeling that Jack might bring something valuable into their lives, even if he didn't yet understand it himself. Tension reached a quiet peak one afternoon when Alex fell while trying to reach a swing. The boy's wheelchair tipped slightly, and panic surged in Mark's chest. Before he could react, Jack was there, steadying the wheelchair and lifting Alex gently back into position. His hands were surprisingly careful, precise, and deliberate, revealing a patience that contradicted the chaos his presence often suggested. "You okay?" Jack asked, his voice softer than Mark expected. Alex nodded, wide-eyed, not afraid at all. Mark's gratitude collided with his unease. This man, who everyone feared, had just protected his son. Something inside him shifted, a crack forming in the wall of fear and judgment he had built around Jack. Jack stayed only a moment, observing as Alex regained his balance and laughter returned to his face. Mark approached cautiously, unsure what to say, what to feel, or how to process the unexpected kindness. "Thank you," he said finally, voice rough but sincere. Jack nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and retreated, fading back into the background where he always seemed most comfortable. Mark realized, with a strange mixture of apprehension and relief, that Jack's presence was no longer just a source of tension. It was a challenge, test of trust, and perhaps a glimpse into the complexity of human nature. By the end of the week, the dynamic had subtly shifted. Alex's laughter became more frequent, Emma's presence a constant source of joy, and Mark began to accept the unpredictable nature of life, understanding that sometimes people who seemed dangerous or distant could surprise you with empathy. Jack's watchful eye remained, neither fully friend nor foe, but a looming, silent force that would soon become an undeniable part of their lives. In quiet moments, Mark found himself wondering about the stories behind Jack's eyes, about hug, every laugh, every quiet moment together became a reminder that resilience wasn't solitary. It was shared, nurtured, and strengthened by those who cared for him. One rainy evening, as thunder rumbled softly in the distance, Aiden found himself confessing more than he intended. "I don't know if I can do this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. a silent promise of support. "You're stronger than you think," she replied. "You faced every day with courage, even when it scared you. You're not alone." The honesty of her words, the way she saw him, without judgment, allowed him to release years of pent-up fear and doubt. He spoke about the sleepless nights, the constant worry for Lily, the moments of despair that had haunted him for months. And for the first time, he didn't feel weak. He felt human, real, and connected. As the storm outside subsided, Aiden realized that crisis, while terrifying, had brought clarity. He saw Emma not just as a colleague or a friend, but as someone who understood the depth of his heart and the weight of his responsibilities. Their bond, forged in small acts of trust and quiet support, had grown stronger through shared vulnerability. He began to notice subtle signs of affection in her gestures, the way she lingered when helping a child, the soft glances she cast when he succeeded, the warmth in her voice during their late night talks. Each observation deepened his awareness that love could emerge not in grand declarations, but in steady, patient presence. One night, after tucking Lily into bed, Aiden sat at the kitchen table, replaying the events of the past weeks. The crisis, though painful, had shifted something inside him. He recognized that fear and vulnerability weren't enemies. They were signals, guiding him toward honesty, connection, and growth. Emma had shown him that sharing burden didn't mean losing control. It meant finding strength in partnership. The thought brought a cautious smile to his lips. He felt a spark of hope, fragile but undeniable, that perhaps life could be more than survival. It could be meaningful, fulfilling, and shared. The following day, he arrived at the center with a renewed determination. He greeted the children with genuine warmth, knowing that small victories mattered. Emma noticed immediately, offering a quiet nod of approval. Their conversations flowed easily, alternating between laughter and shared reflection, each word building trust and deepening their connection. Lily watched them, sensing the quiet shift. Her excitement for the day mirrored in Aiden's own energy. The storm of the previous week had left marks, but it had also carved space for growth, understanding, and the possibility of something profoundly transformative. That night, as he tucked Lily into bed, she whispered, "Dad, you look happier." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I am, kiddo. I really am." She nestled into him, and for a moment, the weight of the world seemed to lift. Ian realized that vulnerability, honesty, and connection weren't just lessons for the children he cared for. They were lessons for himself. He felt the quiet stirrings of love and trust, fragile but promising, and understood that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to face it together. The crisis had tested him, shaken him, and yet it had given him something invaluable, a glimpse of what life could be when hearts were open and shared. The weeks after the crisis unfolded gently, like a river finding its way around rocks. Aiden arrived at the community center each morning with a quiet determination, carrying the lessons of vulnerability, trust, and patience like an invisible armor. The chaos of children running, projects spilling, and parents' demands no longer felt insurmountable. He had learned that showing up fully, imperfect, tired, human, was more powerful than trying to control every moment. Emma was always nearby, her presence steady, encouraging, and unobtrusive. They had developed an unspoken rhythm, a silent understanding that extended beyond words, built on shared experiences, trust, and small acts of care. Each interaction with her, each glance or smile, reinforced the realization that he was not navigating life alone. Lily thrived in this environment. She laughed more freely, shared her excitement over little accomplishments, and began forming bonds with the other children. She adored Emma, asking endless questions and sometimes leaning against her shoulder as they worked on crafts together. Watching the two of them interact, Aiden felt a surge of gratitude. Emma's patience and warmth illuminated spaces in his life he hadn't realized were dimmed by exhaustion and fear. One afternoon, as he observed Lily proudly show Emma her completed drawing, he noticed the tender smile on Emma's face and felt a sudden rush of clarity. This connection wasn't fleeting. It was grounding. It was real. And it was meant to last. Work at the center became a place of transformation for Aiden, not just in his skills, but in his outlook. He no longer approached the chaos with anxiety, but with intention and care. Conflicts were handled calmly. Setbacks were seen as opportunities to learn, and victories, both large and small, were celebrated fully. Emma's influence was subtle but profound. She guided with empathy, never forcing, always supporting. Their shared commitment to the children fostered a closeness that felt natural, unhurried, and deeply human. Aiden began to understand that love and trust weren't instant. They were cultivated, nurtured in quiet moments and consistent presence. One crisp winter morning, Aiden arrived to find Emma arranging a small display of thank you cards and drawings from the children. He paused, noticing the gentle way she moved, her focus soft yet deliberate. "They really look up to you, you know," she said without turning around. Aiden felt his chest tighten. "It's because of you," he replied. She glanced at him then, her eyes warm, unguarded, and he felt the weight of unspoken emotions pass between them. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a future that included her, not as a fleeting connection, but as a partner, as someone who could share the joys and struggles of everyday life. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. That evening, after the center closed, Aiden walked home with Lily, snow dusting their coats, and the world quiet around them. She chattered about her day, about friends, about stories they had made up in the art room, her energy spilling over like sunlight. Aiden listened, smiling, letting the warmth of her presence fill the spaces that had once felt empty. At home, he prepared dinner with care, noticing the small rhythms of life that felt steady and comforting. Lily setting the table, their laughter echoing in the kitchen, the mundane tasks becoming moments of connection. In the soft glow of the kitchen light, he felt a quiet certainty. Life could be gentle and fulfilling, and it didn't require perfection to be beautiful. Days later, a quiet snow fell outside as Aiden and Emma worked on the afternoon program. The children were busy with a winter craft, and the room hummed with content energy. At a lull, Aiden glanced at Emma, her hands busy with glitter and glue, and his heart stirred. He realized he didn't want to hide his feelings any longer. "Emma," he began, voice steady despite the flutter in his chest, I don't want us to be just moments in the chaos. I want to be part of your life, really. With Lily, with you, every day. Emma looked up, her eyes soft, glimmering with a mixture of surprise and emotion. She took a deep breath, a quiet smile forming, and reached out to rest her hand on his. I've been hoping you'd say that, she whispered. The next few days unfolded like a dream come true. Ing, Lily, and Emma spent more time together outside the center, walking in the park, baking cookies, and sharing quiet evenings where laughter and stories filled the apartment. Every interaction deepened their bond, each gesture, however small, affirming that connection and love were built in steady, shared presence. Lily's eyes sparkled with delight as she witnessed the friendship and affection between her father and Emma, her little heart sensing the warmth and security that now enveloped their family. Aim watched, grateful beyond words, realizing that this life, messy and imperfect as it was full of joy he hadn't known he could feel. The community center, once a place of chaos and uncertainty, had become a symbol of resilience and transformation. Aiden and Emma's partnership created a ripple effect. Children felt safer, parents felt heard, and even coworkers found inspiration in their patience and dedication. Aiden recognized that the job he had once taken out of desperation had become a conduit for love, growth, and meaningful connection. Every challenge, every misstep, and every quiet victory contributed to the larger tapestry of life they were weaving together. One snowy evening, as the three of them returned from a walk, Aiden paused outside their apartment building. Lily tugged his hand, eager to show him the tiny snowman she had built. Emma stood beside him, her smile warm, eyes reflecting the soft glow of streetlights. Aiden knelt, holding Lily close. I love our life, he said softly. It's not perfect, but it's ours, and I'm so glad we have each other. Emma rested her hand on his shoulder, squeezing gently. It's more than I ever imagined, she replied, and it's just the beginning. That night, Ian lay awake for a few moments, reflecting on the journey. He thought about the exhaustion, the fear, the small victories, and the moments of connection that had led them here. Life was still full of responsibilities, bills, and sleepless nights, but it was also full of love, laughter, and hope. He realized that the courage to show up, the willingness to be vulnerable, and the openness to trust had changed everything. He whispered to himself, we're not just surviving, we're building something real, something lasting. The warmth of that thought settled over him like a soft blanket, and for the first time in years, he felt completely at peace. Aiden, Lily, and Emma continued to navigate life together, each day a testament to resilience, love, and human connection. Small gestures, a shared meal, a quiet conversation, a hug after a long day became anchors in a world that could feel chaotic and uncertain. They discovered that happiness wasn't about perfection, it was about showing up, being present, and cherishing the moments that mattered most. And in that quiet, steady rhythm, Aiden realized that the job no one wanted had brought him everything he didn't know he was searching for: trust, connection, and the transformative power of love. Aiden looked out the window, watching the first light of dawn spill softly across the city. Lily was still asleep, her small breaths even and peaceful, and Emma was quietly arranging breakfast in the kitchen, humming a tune that made his chest feel lighter than it had in years. He realized how far they had come, not just surviving, but truly living. Every struggle, every sleepless night, every chaotic moment at the community center had led them here. He had found love in the most unexpected place, a partner who understood him, a daughter whose laughter filled the house, and a life that was richer and fuller than he could have ever imagined. The warmth of this new chapter wrapped around him like a soft embrace. Ian smiled, thinking about the journey from exhaustion and doubt to hope and connection. He understood now that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to face life fully, to open one's heart, and to trust in the people who mattered most. Emma's hand found his, and Lily stirred, sensing the quiet happiness surrounding them. In that moment, he knew that love, patience, and shared effort could transform even the hardest paths into journeys of joy and fulfillment. Life wasn't perfect, and challenges would come again, but Aiden, Lily, and Emma had each other, and that made all the difference. Together, they had discovered the profound truth that even the smallest acts of kindness, the willingness to show up, and the courage to trust could change everything. If this story touched your heart, remember, even in the most unexpected places, love and hope can appear. Showing up, being patient, and embracing vulnerability can lead to life-changing connections. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that life can surprise us in the most beautiful ways. Single dad took a job no one wanted and found the woman who'd change his life.